In those days of dust and pain, there was a legend. See, some people called them a team. Others called them a family. But what they were was a fire. Today on the Comic Book Report, Guardians of the Galaxy Grootfall. Stick around and check it out. Greetings from the galaxy, everyone. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today, I'm back in the world of Guardians of the Galaxy. I enjoyed reviewing the Bendis Omnibus Volume 1 and that Al Ewing trade paperback some time ago, so I decided to pick up another run. This kicks off the run under the writer team of Collin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing, and boy is it a lot of fun. It's Guardians of the Galaxy meets a Western? Anyway, I can't wait to talk about it today, but before we do, I just want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see something there you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's probably the best way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's Guardians of the Galaxy review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Collin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing, and illustrated by Kev Walker. The comics in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2023. The volume itself collects Guardians of the Galaxy, the 2023 series, issues 1 through 5. And finally, this is a standard-size trade paperback collection with nice glossy print paper stock, a glued binding, and a total of 128 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that trade paperback from Marvel Comics. Like I mentioned, it is standard size. This run began in 2023, and as you can tell, it is kind of a Western-themed Guardians of the Galaxy run. What a novel approach. I was really hooked in right away by this gimmick, or at least it looked like a gimmick at first, but wow, it really won me over almost immediately. Overall, the design of this trade paperback is pretty standard for what you can expect from Marvel Comics. No real bells or whistles here, just a straightforward trade paperback that includes the first 5 issues of the run and a couple extras. And while you can possibly assume for any new creator run on a book that it's a good access point, I will speak directly to this. I think that this is a fine place to begin reading Guardians of the Galaxy, especially if you're culturally aware of a lot of these characters from, let's say, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that film franchise. A lot of the Guardians you see on screen will be represented in this character roster, so I do believe that this is new reader friendly. On that back cover, you get a lot of great art here that showcase some of the artistic talent you get from Kev Walker. Really nice touch here. Love the little bits we get about the book as well. Overall, an effective trade paperback. I think the cover is all done really well. Now a quick look at that binding. As I mentioned, like most trade paperbacks, it is a glued binding. I got a little bit of gutter loss with this guy, but nothing too critical. I didn't really find that anything too important got lost in the gutter, at least from what I could tell. And overall, really, just no complaints with me. I think that this was a pretty well-made little book. I do want to note as well, before we really dive into this book, that I actually got my copy signed by both Collin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing. They showed up at my local comic shop. I did have a chance to meet them last year where they signed a copy of my Batman Beyond Neo Year. This time they signed not only this trade paperback, but my standard size hardcover of the Batman One Bad Day Clayface. Anyway, it was a fantastic experience bumping into these two again. They couldn't have been nicer, and honestly, really standout creators if you ever have an opportunity to see them. They were really generous with their time. Anyway, let's dive into Grootfall. So we jump into this 5-issue trade paperback, and it really establishes this new run for our Guardian team. On this character roster, essentially as part of the Guardians, we have Star-Lord Peter Quill, we have Gamora, we have Drax, we have Nebula, we have Mantis, but Rocket is kind of missing, as is Groot, although they both make appearances later in this collection. And we basically have these couple characters in a more Western-themed kind of town at the edge of space. They're kind of these colonial, just Wild West-like planets or worlds at the edge of the galaxy. There's been a lot of wars and a lot of really sketchy things happening in these kind of borderlands, and you can just tell that the whole Guardians of the Galaxy team has been through some kind of trauma. And we kind of roll into this town, and we have this notion that there's something coming, some kind of event or catastrophe known as Grootfall, and the Guardians are basically doing everything they can to evacuate this planet, to save as many people as possible, but a lot of people are resistant. They're not really going with it. The team is kind of frayed at the edges as well. We still have Peter Quill's Star-Lord at the helm, but no one's really paying attention to his commands. Mantis is clearly scattered and dealing with some personal problems, even as she's helping regulate a lot of people's emotions, so that's a fascinating dynamic as well. Gamora is very on edge. Drax just doesn't want to be bothered with much of any of this. Nebula is really kind of one of the better lieutenants for Star-Lord. She's kind of trying to do what she can, but even she has radically different ideas than Star-Lord as to what they should be doing. At any rate, it's not long before this team of Western Guardians of the Galaxy players ultimately encounter this event known as the Grootfall, where we basically have this gigantic kind of disembodied flaming head of Groot entering into the atmosphere, sending out all these tendrils and basically grabbing people and making them become Groot. And it's kind of becoming this gigantic sort of hive mind of Groot everywhere it goes. We have this Groot head kind of showering down or approaching all these planets, and it's almost like Groot is trying to assimilate everyone, kind of like the Borg. We hear a lot of "We are Groot," and Groot has become a villainous menace, and it's almost treated like a force of nature. It's really, really wild. But this event, when Groot comes and falls from the sky and tries to take over, is known as a Grootfall. So the team tries to, like I said, evacuate or save as many as possible. They're able to save a few, and then they kind of move on and are trying to save other planets or regions to varying degrees of success. And that's really the established setup for this run, that kind of early first issue. From there, we have more kind of starfaring adventures. We have a lot of like wars or battles in space. We have Star-Lord trying to get people to broker peace or make alliances and kind of help with this evacuation effort. But there's a lot of, like I said, kind of geopolitical strife and issues between warring factions that you almost get the feeling that no one really cares about the Grootfall, or it's secondary to their own factions kind of agendas. We have people that kind of almost create a cult around the coming of Groot. We see that on the world that Rocket is actually at. We have Rocket in one of these other kind of western border planets, essentially playing sheriff. He has a mechanized version of a Groot to kind of be his buddy, and he's trying to save this community, and he has these protocols to kind of fend off a Grootfall, and we get to see him dealing with the newest instance of this, and it goes awry. It's really heartbreaking. We can tell that he is maybe the most broken of his team, as he was closest to Groot. There's actually even a panel where we see a wall that says Groots I've killed, and Rocket just has all these tally marks on it, presumably having endured so many Grootfalls and having to destroy these things that look like his friend that he just doesn't believe are Groot anymore. So anyway, he has a failed Grootfall event, and he ultimately gets teleported back in with the rest of the Guardians. At this point, the Guardians believe that there is still a remnant of Groot left. They did find this out because before this, there was a point where Star-Lord and a couple of them get taken in on a kind of Spartaxian hunt, where basically some of these other dignitaries from Spartax, the kind of region that Peter Quills hails from, at least on his father's side, they invite him on this kind of prestigious hunt on this planet, and we find this planet has been inhabited by Groots, and that there is maybe a Groot that feels more like the Groot we know from the Guardians. Anyway, it ultimately tries to hive mind connect with Peter Quill, and we find out it's trying to communicate. We're not totally clear what, but the impression is that there's a part of Groot left that's trying to contact the team. Anyway, the diplomatic kind of hunt situation with Spartax goes awry, but Peter gets what he needed, which is basically more intel on Groot. They team up with Rocket, and they're going to try to head up the next Grootfall and try to communicate as a team with Groot to see if they could find any vestige of their friend back and possibly stop the Grootfalls. Everything comes to a head in the culmination of this first part of the story arc, where basically they confront the Groot, even as all these warring factions are being batted out of the sky by all of these different Groot falls going on in space. The Guardians are separated, and some of them are getting assimilated by Groot, and we ultimately have the last one being Star-Lord, who basically says, okay, let's see what happens, and he kind of jumps into a Grootfall, and that's the cliffhanger where this whole collection actually stops, and we'll get to that as I flip through here in a moment. But that is basically the first half of this arc for this Guardians of the Galaxy run. I know at the time of this recording, they just released the Volume 2 for this toward the end of April here, called Groot Rise. I think this finishes out this main kind of Groot-centric story arc for this Guardians run. I hope to get a copy of that, because honestly, I enjoyed this enough to finish the story arc. I will say that maybe is a problem with a collection like this. Unlike that Al Ewing complete collection I reviewed, or even the first volume of the Bendis run, I don't feel like I got a huge bite of kind of meat of a comic run here. I just got the first taste. It's like the first act of a storyline. Like I said, you still get kind of a full experience. There's a fun little couple things that happen in this book, but you don't feel like you get the story payoff completely in this single volume. I believe we'll need at least Volume 2 for that, and who knows, there might be a bigger collection that's released someday. But I think as a Volume 1, this does a really sufficient job of engaging and hooking me as a reader for this new run. I will admit I do like the writing style of this team, Collin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing. I've had the opportunity, like I said, to read and review in some extent the Batman Beyond Neo year they did for DC, as well as that Batman One Bad Day Clayface one-shot, which I reviewed when I reviewed the entirety of that big box set. Anyway, because of some of the readings I had here from Collin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing, I've really just become a fan, and having an opportunity to meet them last year and having them be just such stand-up guys, it made me want to read more from them, and honestly, everything I've read so far has been a ton of fun. This was on my list. I'm really happy I checked it out. I don't know if it's my favorite Guardians run. I don't know if I'd say that quite yet. I'm still just getting into this franchise. I know there's a lot of big runs I haven't checked out yet, but I'm interested. I'm interested in this title. You know, I hadn't heard about Guardians before watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe film and that whole franchise, but that really got me excited for the characters, and I've enjoyed the Guardians comics I've read thus far, this one included. I do want to say as well, it's fun to have a series like this within the Marvel Universe that feels so disconnected from the rest of, well, the Marvel Universe. This is so on the edge of the galaxy in deep space that you don't have any shenanigans happening in New York relevant here on this scale, and I kind of like that. In some ways, it almost feels more indie because of that. We don't see a ton of connection to other aspects of this universe. It just feels kind of like a self-contained ecosystem, and I think that that's a fun thing for this. I love seeing the character interactions. I do want to see more depth as to how this team is broken down. I definitely know it was caused because of all this Grootfall shenanigans. But you kind of get the feeling like the story and kind of plot device is maybe center billing of this run so far, and the characters kind of all graft around that central plot device of the Grootfall and this team falling apart. I'm really hoping that as we read Groot Rise, there's a lot more character depth kind of pursued, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface, especially with characters like Rocket, or even Peter Quill or Drax. Like, I think that there's much more going on here that I want to know about. So I'm hoping we get that in further issues, because I do think that the storyline is engaging. What we do have from these characters is really fun, though. Like, I don't need to go super cerebral or deep with any of them, but maybe a little bit just to pay off or kind of round out some of the character arcs, I think would be really great. But this volume by itself, like I said, it's an effective first volume. It launches this run, and I think it was done well. As I mentioned a bit earlier, I love the Western motif of this run so far and kind of the locales and the aesthetic they're looking for. I think it really sets this run apart. I know seeing Peter Quill in a kind of cowboy hat on this dusty desert planet, right away it just evokes something specific that I don't usually get in the hyper science fiction world of Guardians of the Galaxy. To go Old West but juxtaposed with kind of technology and just planet jumping, it's just a really, really fun mix, and I just think it works great. Switching over now to the art from Kev Walker. This is an artist I think I've seen around before, but I can't quite place what I've read that has had his art in it. I do like this style overall. It's maybe a little bit too cartoony or animated to me, but I love the way he does scene or set. I think that we have a really good immersive sense of place throughout this book. I think that there's so much great detail in the landscapes that he does. The character models are all very distinctive as well, which I really like. I think think that he has a great sense of action and kind of visual moments and effects that he does with big, bombastic, maybe fire or explosion or action. There's a kind of a kineticism and excitement about a lot of the scenes that he does and how he lays out the panels and things like that. I do think that he's a tremendous talent here. I think it really fits the feel and tone of this run quite well. And overall, I just don't really have any complaints there. I think the art was, like I said, really well suited and just kind of interesting. A couple variant covers there at the end, and that's really Guardians of the Galaxy Grootfall. And now, the grade. For a very fun blend of Western and science fiction epic, coupled with some very, very animated and a kinetic kind of art, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 Grootfall from the 2023 series a B. This is another stellar performance here from Collin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing, at least in my opinion. A very solid and interesting kickoff to a comic book run. Really enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm really excited to see where the story arc goes from here in Groot Rise, but I thoroughly enjoyed what I had in these pages. It read fairly swiftly. I think it was excellent for new readers, and I think if this sounds up your alley, maybe give it a shot. Would love to hear those that are current with Guardians of the Galaxy. Let me know what you thought. Does this run pan out? Does the story arc really stick the landing? I'd be curious about all that. I hope to get the Volume 2 sometime in the future. Maybe let me know if you'd like a review of that as well in the comments. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks so much, and have a good one.